Hey Terrace CRC, this is my video prepared for the last week of May, following up on my last video on the life cycle of a church. In that video I mentioned some stuff about vision, and so I want to explain that further. We have come out of a time as the church, like a couple of decades, where vision casting and having vision and mission statements had become a big deal. This was picked up out of some businesses. I remember reading one, I don't remember what it was, but like Subway had a line that was on the wall, to make the best sandwiches in the world or something like that as their vision or mission or purpose statement. And it was believed that if any organization did that, created a statement like that, it would bring about reaching the goal of the statement. And so we even had, if any of you remember, there was a mail out from the denominational office of two posters. One was vision and one was mission. And I haven't seen them in any church lately, let me put it that way. They are, if they still exist, in some closet somewhere, collecting dust. So that gives you a hint as to how effective they might have been. Since those came out, that would have been maybe the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. Since those came out, there has been a kind of a wave of stuff through the church where experts could come in or churches themselves could run a process by which they created a mission and vision statement. And some of those are still active in churches. People still use them. But a piece that often failed on this was that there was no plan for implementation. So let's just say the vision statement was to become the most hospitable church, the church with the greatest hospitality in our city. There was no plan activated after that. This was just stated as a dream and maybe put on a banner or something in the church. The other thing is that often these statements were committee statements. And so although not offensive, they also weren't strong because they were sort of neutered by having been created with multiple layers of values being inserted into them. So having watched this happen, I am not a fan of mission and vision statement work in a church unless there is that third piece of a plan to activate, and unless there's somebody driving that plan. So what these processes became, in my view, is a way that we lie to ourselves. So when the visioning or mission process would happen, there would be meetings, there would be town halls, there would be circle tables, circle conversations, and people would begin to state first of all, their ideal for the particular church they were doing this for. So ideally this church would be XYZ. And so idealization would be one. And second would be a layer of rightization. So what people saying what they think is right. So in the CRC, the language would be, we want to be a church where the preaching of the word is supreme above all else, or pure, or whatever in those kind of categories. And so that would be then giving the quotation marks historically right answer, because that's what you do, you give the right answer. So, but it wouldn't be, that second one wouldn't necessarily be a living vision within the people. Most of the processes that I've read about after the fact or been part of have in the past decades moved to connecting with the community, to some kind of an outreach statement. And it's difficult for churches to find a statement that balances internal desires, because those are the ones that are strongest, and the desire to connect externally with those currently outside of the church. So idealizing or rightizing, I'll just say. I'm trying to think of another word, but I can't think of it right now. And so the visions and mission statements would be nice and not objectionable, but they would have no traction. They would have no teeth. They wouldn't really be something that was living for the members of the congregation. Ideally, and I picked this up from a friend who was into this for a while, ideally, you should be able to walk in as a visitor to any church and find somebody doing something, and you would be able to ask them, so why are you helping out in the nursery? And they would have a vision and mission based statement of why that was the case. But you know the kinds of answers you would probably get. Well, it was my turn, my mom told me I had to, I have children in the nursery, so I have to take my turn. All those kinds of things, but those are not mission and vision driven. So what I began to explore, this is starting some probably 10, 15 years ago, basically as I became a specialized transitional minister, is there another method? Is there another process? And what I believe to be the case, I haven't found the ideal process yet, although one that's called appreciative inquiry gets close to what I'm talking about, is to identify the actual values of the congregation. In other words, the actual values lead to the actual actions of the church, and therefore are their kind of working mission and vision. So, but that is very hard to accomplish, particularly like just walking in and observing a church, because it's highly interpretive. For instance, if fellowship time is the most animated in a church compared to kind of blasé worship time, that says something about the values of the congregation. And it would be good to have a conversation around that as a congregation. What are the values we are showing here? And so I guess that's all I'm going to say right now, is that I'm in a process, in a journey of exploring how do we identify the values of a congregation, how do we identify them accurately, and how do we identify them in a way that doesn't upset too many people. I remember in one church, this was after COVID. First of all, I was part of a church when COVID hit. The only church I've heard of in all the churches I've known that decided to shut everything down when COVID happened. So they, even though there were offers to do so, they did not accept doing video sermons or anything like that. They just shut down completely. There were other reasons for that, but that's not the point of this video. So, but in another one, where they finally, after COVID had lifted enough, decided to re-engage in offering coffee after the service, and this was a church that was keeping attendance. The attendance that particular Sunday, when it was known coffee would be served, was up by something like 20%. And I remember being quite upset that because of what that indicated in terms of a value that was not offered, that had been keeping people at home. That's how I interpreted it. I agree it's an interpretation, but I think you will see what I mean. That the attendance increased 20% on the Sunday that people knew coffee was going to be offered after church. On the one hand, that's positive. Fellowship is a big part of being a church. And staying in touch and getting to know each other. Absolutely. But still, to my preferences, it had just too much weight. And I generally don't enjoy fellowship time either, as someone who's wired as an introvert and is usually pretty tired after a service, so doesn't have much energy for conversation even beyond being an introvert. So I just wanted to put that out to you, explain a little further what I had said the last time, is that I think identifying actual values, core values, so not the ones we say we have, but the ones that we act out, which can be retro-identified because they're identified from the actual behavior of the congregation. Identifying those and then finding, after they've been identified and owned by the congregation as, yep, that's our values, then beginning a conversation about, is there anything about them that needs to be adjusted to be a better outpost of the kingdom of God in our city, in our town. There you have it. I pre-recorded this because I'm going to be in Edmonton visiting my home and my wife and doing some appointments in the time that this video will come out. I hope you appreciate and understand, and if you have feedback, I'm always open to feedback. You can email me or you can set up a coffee with me and we can discuss anything you've heard in any of these videos. Be well.